Okay, and we're live. And hello, Jeff.
Hello, Arnold.
It's nice to talk to you again.
Oh, it's always nice to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And how have you been?
Oh, we've been great. We've been kicking it. We had an interesting we had an interesting road trip this last week, and I got to guest speak at the Glenview Church of Christ in Glen Rose, Texas, which is where my in-law Sherry's parents attends, and my father-in-law is one of the elders. And we had some car issues going there, and hello, friends and neighbors. This is Spiritual Defense coming to you live, and this is based down in the Rio Grande Valley. If we were to throw a rock from Arnold's studio here in McAllen south, we would hit Mexico. So north of us, and technically outside the Rio Grande Valley, is the small, lovely town of George West, Texas. I am not making that name up. That is the legit name of the town. Arnold can verify.
Yeah, that's the name of the town.
Yes, and it sits on 281, and it's about, two and a half hours north of here, más o menos.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're listening, we're going there, and I'm listening to the Les Miserables soundtrack, which, if you've never read the musical, you should. If you are a reader, I would really suggest you read the book, because the book is also very good, very long, 1,500-page book. I am not kidding. But it's well worth the read, and the musical, the story, everything about it just wrecks me. It just absolutely emotionally wrecks me.
I still have not seen the movie.
Oh, no.
Or read the book.
Yes, it is.
I'm missing out.
It is a great story of redemption and forgiveness, and just all that kind of stuff is in it. It's very, very powerfully written. Victor Hugo did a fabulous job on that one. He's the guy who wrote it back in the 1800s. So anyway, I just got done reading it, I just got done listening to it, as we hit George West. There's a gas station, like a mobile station or whatever, on the intersection of highways 281 and 59. And we pull in, we usually stop there, restroom break and whatnot. So we stop there, and I get out, I'm like, oh, we're smoking. We have smoke coming out from under the hood, and it's like, yes, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we popped the hose, opened the hood. There was no coolant in there, and so we bought some coolant, put it in, got on the road, got about halfway between George West and Three Rivers, which is the next town to the north, 11 miles away from George West. We got about halfway there. Car's overheating again, got out, no coolant again. So long story short, with the help of some friends, parents of ours, I'm a really good friend with one of the deacons at the Bridge Avenue Church of Christ in Weslaco. His parents live in George West, and they came out, and they took Sherry and the kids to their house, and like fed them and everything, and again, it was one of those situations that we got to experience what having a Hispanic grandmother is like, because she took the family and fed them, got two 12-piece boxes of Church's chicken.
Oh, wow.
With large size, and we're talking about for 3 people, and then when we leave, she packs up all the leftovers and leaves nothing for her husband and gives it all to me. I need to eat that much, and so while that's happening, I'm out with the car for a couple hours, and my friend's dad is going back to town, found the mechanic, and trying to get the part, and lo and behold, the part we need is only a Ford dealership only part. They don't sell it at the part stores. It's called, I'm not a car guy, I believe they called it an expanding hose. It connects the reservoir to the engine to circulate the coolant, right?
Oh wow.
And so they don't have, so we have to get it to the Ford house, which they have one in Three Rivers. So we had to call a tow truck, and so get all that done. So it gets taken there. Now my thinking is I am the scheduled replacement preacher for the Glenview Church of Christ this Sunday, because their preacher is vacationing out of town, and this is Friday, and it's so now my thoughts are all automatically on. I have a to use your parlance, I have a gig.
Yep.
I have a speaking engagement. I have this responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, it's like, okay, maybe I can like send them some of the sermons I've done on YouTube, like chop them down and just send them those that they can play it live and da 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 da. Later, when afterwards, my father-in-law was like, dude, we would have come and got you. Actually, he didn't say dude. My father-in-law is a country boy. He doesn't say dude. But anyway, he said we would have come and got you and just hauled you in the truck up here, and but it didn't come to that, and because it didn't become of that, because while we're at the Ford place, talking to my friend's dad, and he's like, well, why are y'all going to Glenrose? Are you vacationing? I said, no, I'm not vacationing. I'm a preacher, and I'm speaking at the church. And he's like, oh, you're a preacher? I said, okay. He says, well, why don't you take our van? Now, I don't know him. I know his son.
Yeah.
Fairly well, but I don't, he doesn't know me, and that's what comes out of his mouth. Why don't you take my van? And I was like, are you sure? Because we're talking about, Glenrose from McAllen, Texas, where we live, is like 6 to 7 hours. So we'll probably need to go about another 5 hours based on where we were. And so again, it's like, are you sure about this and everything? So we go back and he's like, he looks at me and with his eyes he says, "Shut up, you're taking the van." And and so when he picks up his wife when his wife picks him up at the Ford house and we get everything switched over, he shakes my hand, looks me in the eye, and he says, "The man of God will make his destination." I was like, wow. And we got into the van and took off, got to Glenrose, and had a fabulous weekend. Sunday could not have gone any better if I tried. My sister-in-law told me later that she actually had one of the members of the congregation, actually she texted her in the middle of the sermon, send her a text message in church. I really like this guy.
This guy's good.
So it went really well. And so we come back Monday. And we get a call in San Antonio, the car's done, which that was another thing. It's like you can only get the part at the Ford house, but that particular Ford house in Three Rivers wasn't going to get the part till Monday.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and it was like, and they have another one in Beeville. And again, I'm not making up these town name folks. They're worth a Google. They weren't going to get the part till Tuesday. So, again, it was just a whole bunch of, small town stuff. Yeah. So, anyway, they call Monday and they say, the car's done. And we're like, oh, cool, station. We can... go and pick it up, and there you are. So which we do. When we get it done, we paid for it. We get 5 miles from town, overheat again, same stuff, spewing coolant and everything, right. And we just left. And the Ford house closes at 5. This is 4:45 that all this happens. And so we call him back. It's like, we're on the side of the road again. What's up? And, you'll have to drive it back here. Drive it back.
Drive it back.
I can't drive it back there. How do you expect me? So we had to get it towed again.
Oh man.
And I was like, well, can y'all look at it? It's like, no, it's 5, it's closing. We can't get to it till first thing in the morning. And we're like, well, okay, looks like we're spending the night in the grand town of Three Rivers, Texas. Yeah. Here we go. Which on top of that was an interesting, because Western Pacific had a bunch of workers in town because they were doing something on the railway station. So not only were we in Three Rivers, Texas, but we're in Three Rivers, Texas, one of the few times in which most of their hotel rooms were occupied. Mm-hmm. So you know how sad it is to be able to say we could not find a room in Three Rivers, Texas?
That shouldn't be that hard.
No, so we went to the edge of town where 281 runs into 37. There's a Motel 6 out there, and the workers didn't make it all the way out there yet. So we were actually able to get a spot and stay the next day.
Oh wow!
Get the car back, and there you are. So we made it home. We made it home safely. We made it home a day late, but but we were safe, and the car's been running good since. What happened was that there was another line that runs along the back of the engine that also was like worn.
Really?
And it was, apparently they say, well, I think it might have been dripping, and then it just decided to burst, and that caused the other one to burst. And,
oh, wow.
And it's like, yeah, they're just hard plastic. But I was like, wait a minute. These lines that are responsible for coolant are made out of hard plastic, and they're made to hold hot liquid from one part of the engine to the other on next to a very hot engine in and of itself.
Yep.
And I was like, dude, man.
It's not like you're paying for a Ferrari.
Yeah, I know.
Like, oh, you want the metal tubes? Oh,
Yeah, but you know what's funny? It's like I had to replace the battery in that car the day before we left.
Yeah.
And I had to take it to the shop to do that because the battery is halfway underneath the windshield wiper.
Well,
And then the coolant spout, to actually add more coolant in here, we had to get a funnel and wedge it underneath because the half of the reservoir sticks out, but the actual spout is underneath the windshield wipers.
oh man,
So it's like, who designed this car?
that's the Ford Escape.
Yes,
You have-
that's a 2014 Ford Escape. I'm
All right.
about to be sued by Ford
Yeah.
for,
Hey,
slander.
That's not slander if it's true.
So yeah, I mean that's what it is. It's just a little thing, but anyway. But you know what? It was a mission successful because we went through all that, and the family still loves each other. We
Yeah.
didn't start sniping at each other, and
Really, it's a miracle.
I wouldn't say it was a miracle, but again, it's one of those things that I have a past of allowing things to get to me, and if I'm not careful, it can still happen.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those things like what can you do? I mean, it's nobody's fault. It is what it is,
Yeah.
and it's just you take out this stuff on your family around you because it's easy. They're easy targets.
Yeah.
That they'll always be there. So sometimes you're tempted to take them for granted, and that's not right. It's definitely not right. And if it's something that we struggle with, it's something that we should strive to get better at, because that's not what family is for. You don't get to treat like dirt the people who are always around you just because they're always going to be around you.
That's true.
Yeah. So I don't know. That might be a sidebar of what you were wanting to talk about today, but yeah, that was one of the morals of our weekend.
Oh well, that does not tie into anything I was going to talk about today. Just so people know, we're improving this.
Yeah.
No, but I get you, man. Sometimes, like, I tell people a lot, like, when it comes to having patience with people or being kind to people, it's definitely easier for me to be patient and kind with strangers than it is with, like, my own family.
Yeah.
Or like my mom, for example.
Right.
It's easy for me to be like, frustrated with my mom. Like, why don't you get it? Why give me a hard time and blah blah blah. And it's bad. It's bad, and I struggle with it. Like I always have, and I still do. But I catch myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it comes down to, like, it's more than just family. People, like, friends do it to friends.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if they've known each other for a long, long time, and you get the idea of, like, seeing your friends all the time. And I have so many cases of, like, people that I know just, like, sniping at each other just because, like, they spend too much time together. I was like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, yeah, that's how it is.
I haven't heard it in a long time, but there used to be the saying of you fight like an old married couple.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
that's the thing is like, why do you do that? It's because, I mean, it's again, the constantly being around each other, and things just boil to the surface. And it's around your loved ones, you allow some of your walls to come down.
Yeah.
And again, it's also that taken for granted that they're there, and you just, you have to be nice, or you feel like that you have to put this veneer of niceness around strangers or around your coworkers, especially around your boss and all this stuff. But at home, you can just let it fly and act however you want to. And again, it's a mistake. And again, one of the things we talk about a lot here in spiritual defense is the subject of spiritual discipline, which discipline is something that always has to be practiced. It has to be watched out for. We're told that Jesus, never sinned. But that doesn't mean Jesus was never tempted. Jesus was tempted all over the place, but he didn't allow the temptation to become sin through the choices that he made. And the thing about Jesus is that he was around people a lot, and people can be irritating.
Yeah, he had to go away for 3 days at a time sometimes.
People can be irritating, and that's why he would go up onto the mountains, and he would spend nights in prayer after dealing with the masses and everything, because people can be irritating. And we're not even talking about, like, it's easy to poke fun at the Pharisees, those people who got into Jesus'
like his own followers, like the apostles. I can imagine Jesus getting a little frustrated. I mean, he's kind of vocal about his frustrations if you look into it. Like, if you read, I was reading through, was it Mark or Luke? Right now I'm reading Luke, but I think it was in Mark, just the way he like kind of responds to the apostles when they ask. I don't want to say dumb questions.
There is no such thing as a dumb question.
There's no such thing as a dumb
There's
question.
no such thing as a dumb question.
When they ask, I don't know, some kind of a question without knowledge. I don't know. Like, for example, when they ask, who can we sit at your right and your left hand? That wasn't the first time that Jesus had to deal with these guys like asking who was better.
Well,
and
now,
he was like,
now that's an interesting one, because that's one. Now, what he's talking about, folks, in case you don't know it, is like you get this out of the couple of Gospels. I think you get it out of Matthew and you get it out of Luke. Mark, I think, talks about it. That's off
I'm not sure if it was in Luke.
But anyway, no, it is in Mark as well.
It's in Mark.
But anyway, yeah, it's in Matthew and Mark. I think it is. Anyway, long story short, James and John, two of Jesus' followers, approach Jesus, and parents of teenagers, let this one hit you sideways. It's James and John go to Jesus and they say, give us whatever it is that we ask for. It's like, whoa, hold on, slow your roll. Let me hear what you have to say first. It's like if my kids came up to me and say, hey, I want you to do for me whatever we ask you. No, ask me first and then we'll see. It's like, I want to hear what it is. But that's what they say. They say, hey, let one of us sit at your right and one of us sit at your left when you come into your kingdom. And what they're asking for is that they're asking for the seats of power when Jesus comes into his kingdom. At this point in the game, the disciples still believe that Jesus is going to establish some sort of earthly kingdom with earthly power, earthly riches, and the whole shebang. And they want to be as close to the seats of power as possible. I mean, after all, John is believed to have been like Jesus' best friend. People say it was Peter. No, it was actually John. In the Gospel of John, John is repeatedly called the apostle whom Jesus loved, or the disciple whom Jesus loved. And so this is them doing it. And so Jesus says, you have no idea what you asked for. You don't know what you're asking for. Because what they're, he said, he'll tell them then that these seats to sit at my right or my left, they've been reserved. Basically, they've been reserved for those who they've been prepared for. And he's talking about the two thieves on the cross that will be crucified with Jesus as Jesus dies. All right, so that's what he was talking about there. And now the funny thing about this whole thing is that the other disciples, when they find out about it, is that the Bible says they get indignant or they become angry at James and John for asking Jesus this. But the thought that I always had running around the old ADD brain is, are they upset because James and John tried to pull this, or are they upset that James and John thought of it first?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the second.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, because they're all trying to get. One of the Gospels talks about that for 3 years, and on the very night that Jesus is betrayed, that they're still trying to figure out who of the disciples is the greatest.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a running. Yeah. This was like an on again, off again, running dialogue throughout the entire 3-year ministry of Jesus. The disciples squabbling over who's the greatest disciple. And and from a certain point of view, some people might think I'm sounding nuts. Thank God for it, because it was out of those conversations that Jesus will give us lessons about service. I did not come to serve, but I did not come to be served, but to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. And some of the teachings like that, it's like that's where the some of the great serving teachings of Jesus came from. Jesus washing the disciples' feet out of John 13, and having to teach them what being a follower of Jesus was going to be about. We wouldn't have gotten those if the disciples had their acts together.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that as much as Jesus wanted to teach them, that he got frustrated when they didn't get it.
Well, he had to rebuke them. I mean, we're told that.
He had to, that's true.
Rebuke. Jesus had the audacity to rebuke his disciples. Well, of course he did, but he still loved them. I mean, because you notice this about Jesus. He would rebuke his disciples, but how many of his disciples did Jesus send away?
None of them.
I'm about to say, this is radio. Shaking your head doesn't do very good.
None of them.
None of them. No, he doesn't send away people. Jesus didn't send them away. Now, people decided to leave, they would leave. And many disciples did leave Jesus, John 6 tells us. But Jesus saying, okay, I've had enough of your foolishness. You need to hit the bricks, Junior. No, that didn't happen. So Jesus will rebuke. Jesus will teach. Jesus will guide. Jesus will try to take these guys who didn't know what being a follower of Jesus was about at all in the beginning, and mold them to become fishers of men, as he would tell Peter, and so that they could become something more. It takes guidance, and if we're going to be people who like lose it with our fellow man over every little foolish thing that somebody does as they're seeking to try to become a stronger follower of God, we're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's the truth of it. Is like we're not going to get very far. We got to be willing to work with the masses, and we take it for granted. It's like, well, we've had the Bible for 2,000 years. You know, we should be better at following it. Well, are you? How well are you? I mean, we cannot have hatred and lack of patience with people just because they have the audacity of sinning differently than I do. And so it's the willingness to be patient with other people and help guide them on. But yeah, sometimes they had to be rebuked.
Yeah.
They did. But just because someone's rebuked doesn't mean that they're hated. And that's something that's sorely missing in today's society, is that we think if someone speaks against us, if someone rebukes us, if someone has the audacity to correct us, that means that they hate us, or they're speaking down to us, or whatever, you know. And it's like, that's not true at all. They're trying to make us better.
Yeah.
You know, and everybody gets this. You know, if someone's trying to take time out of their life to try to correct you or guide you to make you better at what it is that you're trying to do, thank God for them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Yeah. Well, now what?
Well, don't say it now what.
Well, now what? But no.
But, you know, I mean, this continued on through the churches, too.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Jesus did it for 3 years, but the interesting thing, you know, and this is the interesting dynamic, and Jesus was in full-time ministry for 3 years, so all of the apostles had longer ministries than Jesus did by far. You know, and that's kind of a weird thing to say, but it's true. I mean, at least for as far as Jesus' earthly ministry goes. I'm not talking about his existence throughout all eternity, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about his 3 years. And so as the apostles take the reins, so to speak, in the book of Acts and start establishing the church, and then later the churches, this is when we start getting the epistles. You know, and the thing about the epistles, and, you know, if I'm using the slang, the epistles just mean those letter books, you know, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st, 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, you know, Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd and 3rd John, Jude. You know, all these epistles and letters that are in the Bible. You know, a big reason why these were written is trying to teach people how to get along with each other. You know, I mean, people seem to be okay. I mean, followers of God seem to be okay with the idea of God or the idea of Jesus. You know, the idea of the Holy Spirit, not quite as much, but basically, you know, God and Jesus. We're trying to work on the spirit side of things. But it's the idea of having to put up with each other.
Yeah.
You know, to put up with each other. We want God's grace, but we're not as willing to throw grace to our fellow man. And the Bible is clear when it talks about forgiveness. You know, look up the teachings of Jesus when it talks about forgiveness. And he'll tell us again and again and again, if we're not willing to forgive our fellow man, we do not get to put our faith in God's forgiveness of us.
Yeah.
And that is a very sobering teaching.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, and Jesus will also say in the Gospel of Luke, it's like talking about temptation, but he'll also say, if a person comes to you 7 times in a day and commits the same sin and repents of it 7 times in the single day,
you gotta forgive him 7 times.
You gotta forgive him 7 times.
Yeah,
and again,
I read that.
This is right. I mean, this is in the
one.
single day. If someone does you wrong 7 times in a single day, and they come to you in repentance, you got to forgive them.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, why? Well, do you want God to forgive you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Well, then you got to be as willing to forgive. I mean, and right after love, I mean, forgiveness is up there as far as the amount of teaching that is done on that particular subject is forgiveness, or if you want to put forgiveness/grace/mercy. I mean, all these types of things, because this is a teaching that is of God, because the world wants us to be not forgiving.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the council culture that's going on right now. It's stupid. I mean, really, you're gonna start judging things that took place sometimes decades, sometimes centuries ago.
Yeah.
And it's like, goodness sakes, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You know, what's the benefit of pursuing that at all? It's like you forgive it and you move on. I mean, that's the thing, but we don't want to. So the question is, an interesting question that's coming out of this. You know, and the funny thing here, folks, is that Arnold and I briefly spoke like 5 minutes before we hit the record button, and Arnold told me he was going to bring up something, and guess what? We're not there at all.
We're not
but
there
this
yet.
this is we probably won't be there today, most likely.
Maybe not.
But you know, but this is also good stuff. The thing is that why is it that forgiveness is so hard?
Why is forgiveness hard? Well, for me, now that I understand it, it's easier. But it is. I can have sympathy for people and understand why it is hard for them to forgive. Like to me, it's definitely like an ego thing. It's hard to forgive because then I have to either, you know, in some sense, like, say that I'm wrong for being mad. You know, like, you know, it's like, you know, like, I can't do this. Like, I have to let it go. And it's easier to, I don't know, I want to say be cathartic. Like, just like this feeling, it's like an addicting feeling to be angry sometimes, you know, to just, to let things linger or fester. And you're just like, well, like, my day's going bad, but, you know, I hope his day's going worse or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I can't really put my finger on why it's hard to forgive. I just know the feeling of having to forgive big things and it being hard because you feel wronged. You feel wronged most of the time, and does it matter if you feel wronged at the end of it? Like, should you still forgive? And like, the answer is yes. 100% yes. But I think that's why it's hard.
Well, it's hard also because anger is easy.
Yeah.
You know, anger is easy. Anger is a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
Like all emotions, it's something happens and then we automatically turn our anger sign on. This is how come the Bible teaches about not sinning in your anger. It's like that anger is going to happen. It's going to happen, you know, in a flash. But the question is, are we going to dwell on it? Mm-hmm. You know, and that's what we shouldn't do. I mean, because again, you know, someone cuts you off in traffic and you almost wreck and die. You know, it's gonna make you a little bit irritated.
Yeah.
Right? But are you gonna dwell on it all day? You know, and that's where you're like, you know, after you have a minute to like sit there and calm down, you're like, okay, everybody's fine, everything's good, everybody's fine, I'm breathing, you know, I haven't soiled myself, you know, we're all good, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, then
Yeah.
you're like, okay, you know, God bless you, guy, and then you go on to work.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's, you know, people say, oh, that's naive. It's not naive, because what's the benefit? Okay, we want to hold on to.
What's the point of staying angry at them? Like, you should have been looking, you should have been watching where you're going. Oh, look what you did on my car. Like, dude, just get over it.
And that's just an example, but that actually applies to everything. Holding on to anger, storing it, and being frustrated with all people, what's that going to accomplish in the long run? And the answer is very little and nothing. If we are so frustrated to the point that we cannot even associate with our fellow man without looking at somebody and just, you know, like having the mad face on, there is something wrong with us spiritually. It has nothing to do with the individual we're mad at. We like to say it does because people like to think they're good people.
Yeah.
But the answer is, it's like, no, the problem is with the individual who's carrying around the anger. You know, and that's why a lack of forgiveness can corrupt the human heart. You know, to be angry all the time can corrupt the heart. We think that, and I'll blame the Incredible Hulk for one reason. We think being angry can give us strength.
Yeah.
You know, it makes us strong and it gives us strength. And it's like, no, actually, like the Hulk, it unleashes a monster and we cause nothing but havoc. Mm-hmm. People doing things out of anger is just going to bring about more destruction. You know, we might try to justify some things, but in the end, it's still bringing about destruction. Whereas love, mercy, forgiveness, grace can actually bring about healing. And another side of this, and this is how come Jesus would teach about, like, look, if a brother sins against you, take it to him. Take it to him immediately.
Yeah.
All right, don't go blabby. Don't go blabby to your friends. Don't go blabby to the church. Don't, I know social media wasn't a thing back then. They would call it thou book, but it's the idea of you don't go blabby on Facebook. You don't go blabby on Twitter.
Yeah.
You don't go blabby on any of the other social media sites over what was done to you. You take it to the individual first.
Yeah.
Now, why?
It's between you and him. I don't know. Because like you're like it comes back to forgiveness. I mean, we're told also, yeah, to settle it between ourselves first, but then you'll get this outside judgment, right? You're bringing up to, for example, I think it was like you're gonna bring it to the judge, and then the judge is gonna bring in this, and then he's gonna bring in the cops, and then the cops are gonna have to deal with it.
Right.
And you're just involving everyone when you could have just settled it between each other.
And also, let's be honest. Everybody who has ever done us wrong, do we think that every individual who has ever done us wrong knew that they were doing us wrong?
Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't.
Have you ever? Okay,
Yeah,
let's put it at ourselves. I've done people wrong.
Okay.
Now, I hope sometimes when I was younger, it was totally from a bad part, and it was done on purpose. Other times, I did someone wrong. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And that's the type that still goes on today. Sometimes today, I might do someone wrong, but I don't know about it. It wasn't done on purpose.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, since it wasn't done on purpose, I don't know what I did, or I don't know if I offended you or made you angry. Mm-hmm. So how am I going to make it right? How am I going to apologize? As long as you're not willing to bring it up to me. So that's not going to start. That's one reason why it starts with the two. Because you're taking for granted that the person who did you wrong knew about it and did it on purpose. They might not have done it on purpose because life, as John Lennon said, life goes on while we're making other plans. It was something that was totally not looked at. It was done completely on an accident, and they have no idea. But you're going to carry this grudge, sometimes for decades, and sometimes to the end of your life until your dreadlocks are gray. And I know they're getting lighter over there.
Are they getting lighter?
And they're going to have no idea, that you're mad at them for this.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's so sad to me.
Yeah.
It's like I've worked with people, I've invited people to church and they'll say something to me like, well, I haven't stepped into church for 30 years because 30 years ago, so-and-so did this to me. I was like, well, okay, well, was that the church or was that one individual?
Yeah.
It was the one individual. So what in the world?
Yeah.
What's the point of it?
You're going to let that person take you to hell?
Yeah. You're going to let that person keep you away from the good things that could have had just because one person did something stupid, which that person may or may not even realize that they did. Mm-hmm. It gets ludicrous, but it's an easy excuse. It's easy to be angry. It's easy to be unforgiving because being unforgiving is actually easier. Because we want people to apologize to us before we forgive them, but the truth is like some of the most free people in the world are the people who are able to forgive without being asked to.
Yeah. Yeah, I can name a few people that I've forgiven.
Well, don't do it on the
I'm
radio.
not gonna do it.
Well, I'll give you this example. I've read a book called Torture for Christ by Richard Wurmbrand. And this tells the story of a guy who spent 14 years in prison in communist Russia. And the thing about it was again, the book's called Tortured for Christ, so bad things were going on in these prisons. And the author Richard talks about how he gets asked multiple times, how is it that you're able to forgive these people who were torturing you? And he said something along the lines of, well, their system, talking about the communist system, their system and their mindset and their torturous acts are all filled with Satan. They're filled with darkness. They're filled with evil. And so I had to be filled with light. I had to be filled with Christ. Yeah. And so every time that they beat me being Richard, every time they beat me, every time they tortured me, every time they did something, that was from an act of evil. And I would combat that with acts of love. I would immediately forgive. I would immediately give grace. maybe not to them verbally, but in my mind, in my heart, which is actually where it needs to be doing. Because we say we forgive people with our words a lot, but that doesn't mean it's actually happening. But to forgive from the heart, that's what was going on here, and then that constant willingness to forgive again and again and again. These people who were literally causing him physical pain, that's how he did it. To be filled with Christ as they were filled with Satan. And this world is filled with darkness. This world is filled with sin. And the way in which we get over it and move on is to be filled with Christ and to allow the light of Christ to allow us to forgive life situations, world situations, whatever, and to move on with it. Because again, anger and wrath, and all that kind of stuff, we can't handle it. Man cannot handle it. The history books and newspapers are filled with it. We can't handle it. I like how some people put it. One person said, being angry at someone is drinking poison and expecting them to die. I mean, or, being angry at someone is allowing somebody to live in your head rent free, and all this kind of stuff. In other words, the point being, holding on to resentment, holding on to all that actually causes you, the individual, more harm than it does the person. And it's something I told my kids when they come home, they say that they get mad at somebody or whatever. It's like, you know what? They're probably not even thinking about you right now. Yeah. So why are you going to be angry at them? Yeah. It's like forgive it and move on. Do not allow them to dictate how you're going to live your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there.
Have you?
Yeah. Well, it's been a long life, these long 30 years. Yeah, actually, now that we can segue into what we were talking about earlier.
Really? Okay.
So we have a friend named George.
Yeah.
And that's all you get from him. That's all you get from us. That's his name. But he was looking into baptism and, following Christ. And the question of forgiveness was brought up.
Right.
And it's exactly what you're talking about here, the question was that I had asked him was, are you willing to forgive and love your enemies when you follow Christ? And he tells us this long story about how this guy wronged him. I don't even know the story.
Right.
Honestly, I just heard blah, 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 blah. I can't do it. Yeah. And I told him, and I had to show him in the Bible where Jesus says, you gotta forgive. And if you're not willing to forgive, you're not going to be forgiven, all that stuff. But just exactly like this, this guy is letting this other dude who wronged him live in his mind rent free. And he's letting that guy stop him from, having joy in his life,
right,
from having peace, from having God's grace. And I think that's like the majority of everyone in the world. They don't
broad stroke much.
Yeah. They don't. People in general don't like the internet. I broad stroke because we have the internet, and you can see plenty of millions of people who don't forgive on the internet.
Yeah.
When they're commenting at each other. And it's just well, that's what it is now. That these people, they get some sort of high from, typing their little 2 cents on the little screen there, and then they'll wait for the guy to answer, and then they'll go back, and then they'll wait for the dude to answer, and then they'll go back, and it's just dang, dude, you had so much other stuff you could have done today, but you spent all your day waiting for someone to argue with.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, because one day, unless Christ comes back, we're all going to have a last day on earth. And you get to look back at your life. And, I wonder how many people are like, man, I'm dying today. I really wish I spent more time arguing with strangers online.
Yeah.
But again, it's that shows the nature of also not just anger, but how easily people get twisted. And just again, that willingness to forgive and move on. They think that's life. They think that's a quality of life. But again, why do they do it? They do it because it's easy. They do it because it's easy. They sit in front of a screen and they type it out, and there's no repercussions.
Yeah.
They can say whatever they want, and there's no repercussions for what they say. They get to air out all their grievance, and they think it's actually equals to a worthy life, and it doesn't. It doesn't. It's like I strive not to get pulled into those types of things because I view them, and this is my personal opinion. I view it as a waste of time.
Yeah, it definitely
because
is.
again, nobody goes to Facebook looking to learn something. Nobody goes to social media. It's like, oh, I'm glad, Soccer Mom 264 was willing to mention this. Now I can put this into my brain and learn from it and apply it to my life. It's like, that's not the way it works. People go to social media with their minds made up, and they just look for
reinforcement of their ideas.
Of their ideas, and woe be to anyone who tries to contradict them.
Yeah, because you can follow exactly what you want to follow, and the app is tailored to the things that you follow, and literally, like, it just gives you the illusion of this is your world.
Yep.
This is it's centered around you. Well, life's not like that.
It's not.
Surprise, everybody.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, surprise indeed. So, talking about George and, again, the forgiveness issue. One of the most powerful things Jesus ever said, and this is my opinion, because everything Jesus said was powerful. It all had a point. But when Jesus is dying on the cross and he just, says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And Stephen, the first martyr in the book of Acts, says something very similar. Father, do not hold the sin against them before he dies. Again, that's the Christian mindset. That's the Christian mindset.
Yeah.
Again, it's why do people do bad things to each other? And we like to think that they know exactly what they're doing. Well, no, they don't. Not all the time. Yeah. Sometimes they do. Yeah. Sometimes it's malicious, it's premeditated, and all that. But you know what? Sometimes they don't really understand why it is that they're doing it.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to hold a grievance for that. The thing about forgiveness is that the person who's willing to forgive is actually the person who has the power. Because, if you're able to forgive and move on with your life, that shows a great strength. That shows fortitude. And that shows the grace of God. Because, again, there's going to come a time, again, where we're all on our deathbeds, and a thought's going to come into our head. We're going to die today. By the end of the day, I am going to stand before God. And I pray that he's forgiving. And I pray that he's willing to overlook all the stupid stuff I've done in my life. But we have a better shot of God doing that if we've done that to each other. Yeah. So if we want to experience God's grace, we need to be willing to share God's grace with other people today. And what a beautiful world that would make.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to add this. This is what I was talking to my friend Cole about. I told him about George, and I told him about how I said what I said about, you got to be willing to forgive. Now, we're not going to be able to be like Christ before we put on Christ. So, I fear that I might have misrepresented that saying when I told George, you got to be willing to forgive to follow Christ. You have to do that first, right? Because it's easier to forgive when you have Christ with you.
So you said, there you go, you said it though. It's easier. It's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
It's easier.
It's easier to forgive when you have when you have Christ with you. But without him, it's this is how my friend Cole likes to put it. You're just not gonna have it. He's not gonna be able to completely do it on his own. So it's the idea of, I think, what some of the fears I remember I had before I got baptized was everything is just gonna change automatically. Oh, here I go, mission in Asia tomorrow. Yeah. As soon as I get baptized, everything's gonna I'm gonna have to cut off this person, gotta cut off this person, gotta cut off that, I gotta cut off that, and quitting everything cold turkey. Sure, it's possible.
Yeah.
But that's not easy, and Christ just helps with that, and everything takes time.
Well, and also again, before we have Christ, because again, you can call it the Holy Spirit, and it's also seeking to understand the sacrifice of Jesus. The willingness and the ability to be able to forgive is centered upon seeking to understand the sacrifice of Jesus.
Yeah.
Because again, the whole idea, God made him who had no sin to be sin, so that we could be saved through his sacrifice. It's like, it's not that Jesus, died for us. It's like, this is the guy who was innocent. This is the guy who did nothing, totally sinless, and he's the one who was willing to die for us. On top of that, he's willing to forgive us, and this is the other part. He was glad to do it. Nobody had to arm twist him and hold him down on that cross. Because he was willing to go down there himself. In the mid '90s, some people made a Gospel of Matthew movie. It's one of those verse by verse tellings of the book of Matthew, and it's very powerful because I love it. This was like the first time that Jesus was actually played by a guy who smiled. It's played by a guy named Bruce Macchiato, and also I have the book that he wrote after he played Jesus, and just talking about some of the things he went through. And he makes this point. He says, when it came to the crucifixion scene in Matthew, this is after Jesus has been scourged in the whole bit, and they're leading him up there, and they're beating him, about the head and shoulders as they're leading him up the hill, and they put the cross down. He says, if you pay attention to the performance when they put the cross down, him being Jesus, he's thrusting himself forward onto that cross because he wants to be there. Mm-hmm. In other words, no one had to lay him there. I mean, if they did, it was because Jesus didn't have the energy to do it himself. Yeah. But mentally, no one had to lay him there. No one had to force him. No one had to coerce him into dying for us. He wanted to do it because Jesus, at the end of the day, wants to forgive us. The question is, do we want to forgive each other? Mm-hmm. And do we want to allow Jesus to forgive us? Mm. Because we do have a part to play in that, because it's a relationship. And so, again, that's why he came to die for our sins. But he also gave us that illustration of forgiveness. And the thing about it is like, if Jesus is willing to forgive the very worst of any of us that have ever lived on this planet, and again, do some, we like to always throw out like the Hitlers and the Stalins and it's like, let's be honest. I mean, what's think about the worst things that we've done in our own individual lives. Yeah. And Jesus was willing to forgive it. He knows about it. He's willing to forgive it anyway. Who are we then to go to another human being and say, I'm not going to forgive you? Yeah. Even if we forgive them, we never cross paths, we can still forgive them. Yeah. But we're going to have it in our heads. You know what? I'm not going to forgive you. I'm going to hold on to this until I or you die. And the thing about it is like, there's people in the world that have held on to wrongs that were done by other people that are dead, but they still cannot. Even that person's death could not give them peace. Yeah. So again, what's the benefit? What's the high point? There isn't one. No. So, well, folks, that looks like to be about the end of this day. We're about out of time here. Arnold, it is always a pleasure.
Yeah, always a pleasure, Jeff. Thank you so much for stopping by my studio.
Yes, sir.
Until next time.
Yes, sir. Grace and peace to all you out there. God bless.
God bless.